Welcome back to Inside Nashville, where our guest today is Mark Driskill, who's the head of ASCAP's office here in Nashville. And Mark, at the end of our last segment, you began to talk a little bit about the fact that you are a not-for-profit. In fact, it's interesting, as I was listening to you think about it back in the early 1900s, and I'm thinking about how you were going out. Obviously, my mind took me to what's going on in Chicago right now, and it sounded like this was almost, the society was almost a union in a way, where the writers and publishers were saying, you know, we need to get our fair share, and we need to have some representation. So my understanding historically is that ASCAP was the first of the performing rights organizations.
As they are today, yes.
As they are today. So explain a little bit about that. You said now you have competitors. There's ASCAP, there's BMI, there's CSAC. In this not-for-profit world, you're trying to be a pass-through. That's got to be a very complicated thing. So you're trying to pass through all the money, but you're trying to be competitive. And what I'd also like for you to talk about is, why would a writer choose to go to you or go to BMI or to CSAC? How do you differentiate yourself? What's the product differentiation, if you will? So
Well, with that not-for-profit element, you know, I think with the way we were founded by songwriters, they're looking at, you know, how can I make a living out of this? Now, you know, going back to that time, there is no radio. There is no television. Really, all you have is that live performance, or that, you know, that club, that cabaret, those types of things. When radio came along, that's when BMI was founded, because radio saw ASCAP as a monopoly, and ultimately the courts said the same thing, that that ASCAP was not. That it broke some antitrust laws.
I see.
So BMI came into existence on the heels of that.
And that would have been what year
that was 1940.
Okay.
So they came into existence on the heels of that, and you know, really, excuse me, really established that element of competition, mainly within radio. I mean, that was the main. That was really the only aspect, other than cabarets and the clubs at that point. So, you know, the element of competition there has been there ever since. If I remember this correctly, we were going to radio to ask for about 5% of their adjusted gross revenue back in the 1930s. And they felt like that was too much to pay. Today, collectively, the three PROs are getting somewhere around 3.5%.
Wow.
So, you know, I don't feel like 3.5% is a whole lot to pay for your product that attracts listeners that advertisers want to reach. So I don't feel like it was too far out of line, but obviously I wasn't alive in 1940. So that's the way it all went down. So we do have that element of competition here that most of the other countries in the world don't have. Now, there's a lot more of a music economy in the U.S. than there are in other countries of the world too. So, you know, you could say that it makes sense to have that. But we do often ask the question, what would writers and publishers be able to get if there were just one, if there were just one voice, if there were a true collective bargaining arrangement there, like a union? What would it be? With that competition, it makes you differentiate yourself, or need to differentiate yourself a little bit. The society in the UK doesn't have the recruitment needs that we do here. They don't have the member relations needs that we have here.
Because they truly are the only one.
They're the only one. They don't have to, you know, if you want the money that you would earn from radio performances, you have to join PRS.
And so to that point, so if there's a young aspiring songwriter listening to this, what I'm hearing you say, what I think they would hear you say is that if you don't join ASCAP, if you're not a member of a PRO, then the payments that are due to you from a Bluebird or WSIX or Radio Lightning here in town, you're not going to get that unless you're a member. Is that correct?
Or unless you have the leverage to go to them directly on your own.
So like I said, they have to belong.
They need to belong to an organization, yes.
Well, you just touched upon something, and I know everyone who's been in here so far on Inside Nashville, obviously there are great pressures and challenges that are facing the industry today. Some of the work that we've done on the Music Council, we're looking at economic development and how all these individual companies can make it work in this period of time. Do you see a period of time in the future where just because of costs that it will maybe go from 3 to 2, or do you see a time at some point that it might just return back to one for a stronger collective bargaining? Or do you think that that inhibits the ability to get the bargaining done?
I think part of that question is, has to be posed to the Justice Department. What are the antitrust issues that would go along with that? I think that at some point the duplication of roles will probably lend itself to streamlining what we do. Now, there's not only agencies, ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC in the PRO world. There's Harry Fox that aggregates the mechanical right. There's Sound Exchange that aggregates the digital performance right. And then the publishers are left to do sync rights on their own. So there's a lot of infrastructure within today's system. The challenges are the music user needs the ease of licensing that the current PRO model can provide. They can come to us and say, we need a license. By our consent decree, we have to grant them a license immediately, even prior to negotiating the rates. So they get immediate indemnification, so they can get into the marketplace. A lot of times, 2 years down the road, we're trying to negotiate what that rate is. There's an interim rate. We're trying to negotiate what the final rate is. And in today's world, as you can imagine, and even back into the .com bubble, a lot of these companies open up in order to sell in a year or two. They really don't have an ongoing business model. So those are the challenges that we have within that. But the music user likes being able to come to ASCAP to get a blanket license.
It's kind of one-stop shop.
Covers everything, all the performance rights for all of our members. And they don't have to go to each individual publisher or writer and say, well, this is what we can pay you and this is what we can pay you. So they get that blanket license, and the indemnification is probably one of the most precious pieces of that. Without a system like that, without the indemnification, if a publisher were to go directly to radio and say, we want to do a direct license with you, radio is going to say, well, we want to pay you this much. The publisher has the right to say no. At that point, radio has to pull any and all works, any and all songs that that publisher owns. If they don't, copyright infringement laws set in, and it's $150,000 to $165,000 per use. So if a song is played 1,000 times, there's a lot of, so
a
you can
different kind
see
of payola.
there's going to have to be a meeting of the minds within all parties of music. Even the music users, to do this, to have some sort of a means to go forward in a way that is the most economical and in a way that can provide stability, economic stability for writers and publishers to keep to keep writing songs and to keep creating those platforms to get music out there. Music is just, it's such a part of our culture. And I think music is used today more than it ever has been in so many more places. We need music to be out there, but we need good music, and we need these professional writers and these artists who are great writers as well to be able to do that and to be able to make a living at it. And that's where we have to find that balance, I think.
Well, we're going to take a break real quick here with us on Inside Nashville. And our guest today is Mark Driskill. Some very complex business models and situations that you're talking about. And we'll be right back. Please stay with us.